Absolutely true. Thank you both very much.
Thanks, bud.
Look
Thank
forward
you.
to it tomorrow. We are going to go right now to the phone. We're joined by Senator Bill Hagerty. Senator, good morning.
Good morning, Steve. Great to be with you this morning.
Well, Senator, thank you so much for joining us live from Washington. Of course, Senator Hagerty is you're on the Committee on Foreign Relations, but I know that you, along with other members of Congress, have been briefed by the White House. Just bring us the very latest on the situation in Iran.
Well, the situation there, I think, is ahead of schedule. The operation, I think, has been, again, executed with amazing precision. I have to say this, though, Steve, my heart goes out to the families of the military that we lost. The count that I got at the end of the day yesterday was 6 military personnel. I hope that number hasn't increased overnight. But we have taken on what has been a persistent challenge for 47 years. If you think about the Iranian regime that has chanted death to America, that as far back as the attack on our Marine barracks in Beirut back in the early 1980s, where they killed over 200 U.S. military there, the attack on USS Cole, what was funded and financed by Iran in Israel in October of 2023, with 1,200 people killed that day in a massacre, with 40 American citizens killed there as well. What we have is a situation in Iran where the Israeli Air Force had taken out Iran's ability to protect its airspace. We had a situation where our bunker bombs have devastated their existing nuclear capacity, but at the same time, we have an Iran that's belligerent, one that was insistent on rebuilding their nuclear capacity, even started to build new facilities. They have ballistic missiles and launch capability and drones that at this point number 2,500. They're on their way to 8,000 by the end of the year. They were trying to put themselves in a position with these ballistic missiles to make Iran such a porcupine, if you will, Steve, that we would not attack them and they'd have free reign to build their nuclear capacity. That had to come to an end. President Trump acted decisively, again, in partnership with Israel. They have taken out any ability for Iran to protect its airspace, and now that we have opened up that airspace, American assets are deployed much closer to the theater, meaning it'll be much more rapid, much less expensive, and much more effective as we go in and strategically target those locations where they have been manufacturing ballistic missiles and the ballistic missile launchers that are used to fire those at our allies, at Americans, into the Straits of Hormuz, where they have attempted to block the flow of oil. And again, President Trump, you may have seen this, just announced yesterday that he's going to guarantee the passage of cargo ships through that strait so that Iran cannot achieve their goal of disrupting the global economy as part of all of this.
We are joined by Senator Bill Hagerty live from Washington. There's a couple of reports out this morning, Senator, that in fact the timeline was moved up, that as far as the attack on Iran, and one reason is that our intelligence, along with Israeli intelligence, had the fact that the Iranians and the Ayatollah and those that ultimately were killed in the attack, that they were all going to be together last Saturday, which I found interesting. The first day of the work week in Iran, in that part of the world. But anyway, that they were all going to be together, and so our timeline was moved up. Can you speak to that report out this morning?
I haven't seen the report, but I'll just say this again, not knowing what information has been released. We do know this, that 40 leaders were taken in that meeting, and that included the Ayatollah himself. I think they've become complacent, Steve, that attacks would only come at night. They felt they could operate freely during the daytime. This was a daytime attack. What they fail to understand and what they consistently underestimate is President Trump's willingness to use the opportunity of surprise as a tactic. And I just get so frustrated with reporters here who come up to me and say, are you going to do this or do that? Are you going to commit to this or that in terms of how you're going to execute the war? It's not a war. It's a decisive military capability that's being deployed right now. Why would anybody talk about what's on or off the table? You want all options available to your commander-in-chief. And President Trump makes certain that all options are always available. He never takes anything off the table because he wants to utilize that element of surprise. He wants to keep every lever in his control so he can maximize America's leverage going into any situation. This is no different. I think what he saw was an opportunity to make an outsized impact. You want to do that. You want to minimize risk to America. You want to maximize the impact of your deployment of military assets. And I think that's precisely what happened, and the numbers speak for themselves. With 40 of their top leadership gone, including their Secretary of Defense, their equivalent of their CIA director, their national security advisor, it was a significant blow that was leveled to Iran in terms of their top leadership. And again, President Trump just wants this to come to an end. And I think what you've seen following this, with the drones that they've launched, with the ballistic missiles that they've sent out all over the neighborhood, so to speak, against their neighbors. What Iran's intention was to create economic havoc to the extent they could in the region, to create a lot of pain. What it's done, it's turned their regional neighbors strongly against Iran and moved them in our favor. So it's backfired again on the Iranians, another misjudgment. And I think this operation will continue. As I said, they're in a position now to actually ramp up the operation, and I hope that they'll finish it rapidly, and we will see the Iranian missile launch capability completely neutered, and that in itself will put an end to this nuclear ambition that the Iranians have professed for over 4 decades.
We are joined by Senator Bill Hagerty of Tennessee, and he's live from Washington. What about another report this morning and even yesterday that really the leading candidate to take over for the Ayatollah, who was killed last Saturday, would be his son? What do we know about his son? He apparently is who the clerics there in Iran talking about taking over for his late father.
I've not seen any intelligence on the succession plan for the Iranian government related to the son. I would just say this. Anyone stepping into that position, I think, would be quite reluctant right now. If you step back from this situation and see the way it's headed, that is one of the most dangerous places to be right now, to the extent they continue to call for death for America, to the extent that they continue to attack their neighbors. This is going to be a very uncomfortable position for anybody. I think the best option for the Iranian leadership is to take a toll of what's happened, to realize that America is finally serious, that they're not going to be able to tap us along. And you know how the playbook has gone, Steve. They would bring us to the negotiating table. They would promise something. They would always take it away. Their goal, again, has always been to get more time so they can continue to build more capacity. President Trump, talking with Steve Witkoff, a friend of mine, talking with Jared Kushner, another friend of mine, who were leading negotiations, they said to President Trump, these guys are not serious. They're just trying to tap us along again, just like they did President Biden, just like they did President Obama, except this time we're not going to give them billions of dollars of cash so they can use that to fund further military operations and further proxy operations to wreak terror. We're going to shut them down, and that's exactly what's happening right now.
We're joined by Senator Bill Hagerty, live from Washington. What do you make of some of the president's supporters, some that are in the MAGA world, the MAGA movement, and notably people like Tucker Carlson, who are so against this war in Iran?
Well, I'm very sympathetic with the American sentiment that we're tired of these forever wars. And if you think about President Trump's MAGA supporters, it's our sons and daughters that are on the front lines, that are dealing with commitments that have been made by people sitting back in the comfort of their office in Washington. So I completely get that sentiment, but I would just encourage them to do this. Step back and take a look at what President Trump has actually done. Look at what happened in Venezuela. A very surgical operation. President Trump has come in, achieved the objective, an immediate objective, done swiftly and effectively. Maduro was extracted. Now what do we have? A situation where the illicit oil that was coming out of Venezuela going straight to China is no more. We control that oil flow. Guess what's happening with Iran? President Trump, again, is moving decisively. It's a much larger country, a much more difficult situation with a theocracy in charge and 90 million person population there. But President Trump, again, moving decisively and, again, in partnership with Israel. I think they're going to have this wrapped up very quickly. And President Trump will, again, have taken control of an illicit oil flow, 92% of the oil coming out of Iran going, guess where? To China again. And as President Trump continues to step it up, he's shifting the global leverage in his favor. China is trying to choke point us with critical minerals. President Trump is now taking this illicit oil off the market. And if you look at what's happening with Russia, increasing sanctions pressure on Russia as well in terms of their oil sales to China. So all of this is having global implications. And again, stepping back, taking a 30 or 50,000 foot view of this thing, President Trump is shifting the pieces on the playing board to give America more leverage, and he's doing it in a manner that does not put the United States, it puts the United States military at minimal risk. I'm not saying there's no risk at all, and President Trump has warned about this, but I think he's trying to minimize the risk to the men and women of our military, achieve our strategic objectives, and put us in a fundamentally different position so that this axis of evil is no longer able to threaten the United States or anybody else in the world.
We're joined by Senator Bill Hagerty live from Washington. I know that the United States Senate will take up a war powers vote later today, I believe, if that's still on schedule. What do you make of that? And in your opinion, Senator, should the president have gone to Congress for authorization on this?
Again, the element of surprise is absolutely critical here. Every president before President Trump has realized that, too. I think the War Powers Act has been invoked 2 times in history. The Democrats don't have any problem when Bill Clinton and Barack Obama utilized it to drop thousands of bombs in what they view were tactically or strategically important areas to advance America's interest. The reason for this vote, and it's going to fail, Steve, is because the Democrats cannot stand to see President Trump take a win. They would rather disadvantage America. They would rather, it's just hard to believe. But as I listen to some of the Democrat complaints, it's almost as if they're siding with Iran. I know that can't be true, but it just sounds so preposterous the way that they are coming about this. If you think about what Iran has done to American lives, to lives of our allies, we found them at a point where they were at their weakest. I would be very hard-pressed to tell my children and grandchildren that we had this opportunity and did not take it. If we allowed Iran to step back up, gain nuclear capacity, which has been their long-term goal, and to continue to harass in the region, and every one of those harassments takes lives, whether they be American lives or the lives of our allies. If we'd allowed that to continue when we had this opportunity, I think we would have deeply failed our children and grandchildren. So this is, yet again, more theatrics and more political posturing by the Democrats. Look at what they've done with the funding of the government. They still have the Department of Homeland Security shut down, Steve. If you ever thought about when the risks were highest here on American homeland soil, you have to look no further than what Joe Biden did to us when he came into office. He collapsed our southern border. 1,500 Iranians were apprehended. That's not even getting at how many got past Border Patrol. They apprehended 1,500 Iranians trying to enter this country. Do you know what the Bidens did? They let half of them, they released half of them in to, quote, await their trial. They haven't been tried. We don't know where they are in the country. So the probability of a sleeper cell being here in America is certainly greater than zero. Yet the Democrats' decision is, let's defund the Department of Homeland Security. It makes no sense. It does not put America's interests first. And it's time for the Democrats to stop the politics, to stop the theatrics, to lock arms with us and say, look, as Americans, we need to stand up and deal with a force that has been threatening, has been taking American lives, and has been menacing an entire region of the world. Let's deal with it once and for all. Let's put our allies on level footing. And again, that makes us stronger and more capable of dealing with the other threats that we face. And there I'm thinking about the terrain in East Asia with China, the Taiwan Strait, North Korea. That's where we need to focus next.
Hey, final question and off of the Iranian topic, and that is the primaries last night. We know this is a midterm election year. I'd love to get your comment on what happened in Texas last night. Have a lot of attention there. More money spent, they say, on that Senate primary than any in history, as looks like, they are. Cornyn, your colleague in the United States Senate, John Cornyn, will go to a runoff with Paxton, the Attorney General down there, and the President has not made an endorsement. What do you make of that? And then, of course, I know North Carolina was competitive last night.
Well, I'd say this. I've already congratulated my friend Tom Cotton, who won his primary with over 81% of the vote, 82, close to 82%. That's the type of primary I think we'd all rather see, because what happens in these primaries, Steve, is that you're depleting Republican resources that could be better utilized, I think, in a general election. At the same time, you've got to honor the primary process. It gives a chance for our voters to pick the candidate that best represents them. I think the goal right now, I know there's going to be a runoff in Texas. Again, that's going to be expensive, diverting more resources. I hate that we have to be spending money in Texas. I'd rather be spending our funds in those states that are going to be battleground states for us for the general election. But I hope that what we do is bring these decisions to a close quickly, get behind the winner, because the last thing that we want to see is a loss of control to the Democrats in the United States Senate. If they had control, they would do everything. They could just look no further than what they've been able to do now with procedural lockups. They shut the government down for 43 days already. They've now got the Department of Homeland Security shut down. If they had control of the gavel in the United States Senate, I think it would be a complete disaster. They would try to deadlock this country. And again, they'd rather play politics than agree with anything that President Trump might do, no matter how good it is for America's interests. So I think you teed it up well. We've got these primaries that have occurred. They've been expensive. We need to now focus on getting certain that we get the strongest possible candidate in a position to win, because my overarching objective is to make certain that we retain control of the United States Senate. I'm optimistic that we'll do it. I'm even optimistic that we could gain seats in states like Michigan, states like New Hampshire. You look at Georgia, you're very close to it right there, Steve. Hard for me to fathom that Georgia would be a blue state. It's not, yet they're represented by one of the most liberal senators in the United States Senate. John Ossoff is up this time. So I think we've got actually real opportunity, but we can't take anything for granted. And again, these primaries have to happen. I think they're good and in some ways therapeutic for us, but I hate the fact that it requires us to spend resources that I would rather see deployed in a general election.
Senator Bill Hagerty, appreciate your generosity of your time this morning, giving us such an inside look at what the entire nation is concerned about, is talking about. I appreciate it very much.
Thanks, Steve. Always great to be with you.
Thank you, sir. Senator Bill Hagerty, live from Washington. Again, very timely interviews this morning.